If you're not in control, something else is. It's a truth most people ignore because it's uncomfortable. We like to believe we're the ones making the choices, calling the shots, steering the wheel. But look closely. Every time you hesitate to take action, every time you shrink back from an opportunity, every time you silence your own voice, that's not control. That's surrendering control to something invisible and destructive. And the most dangerous part, you don't even realize it's happening. Control is not about movement, it's about authority. You can be busy and still not be in control. You can be working multiple jobs, running multiple errands, having a packed schedule, and yet still be completely out of alignment with your purpose. Motion does not equal direction. People confuse being active with being in control. But if your life is being pushed around by circumstances, emotions, or the opinions of others, you're not leading, you're reacting. And you were never designed to live on defense. Sometimes what's driving you isn't even yours. It could be a parent's voice from your childhood telling you that you'll never be enough. It could be a failure you never healed from. It could be trauma that's now calling the shots in your relationships, your finances, your decisions. These things take the wheel in silence. They don't scream, they whisper. And because they whisper, you mistake them for your own thoughts. But their mission is clear: to keep you small, to keep you still, and to keep you stuck. You must examine what has influence over your life. Who are you trying to impress? What pain are you still avoiding? What belief did you buy into that keeps you in cycles of almost starting, almost committing, almost believing? If you can't answer those questions honestly, you'll spend years driving in circles and call it progress. The truth is, something is always steering. The only question is it intentional or is it inherited? Look at your routine. Look at your reactions. What do they say about who's really in control? If fear is dictating your schedule, then fear owns your future. If comfort determines your effort, then comfort is your master. If comparison decides your direction, then you're following a map designed for someone else's destiny. These influences don't walk into your life with labels. They sneak in through subtle agreements, the things you say yes to without realizing the long-term cost. Many people blame their lack of progress on not knowing enough, not having enough, not being ready. But the truth is, readiness is not the problem. Ownership is. You cannot master what you refuse to claim, and until you take radical ownership of your time, your thoughts, your choices, and your voice, you will always be led by forces outside of you. You will always live in response to the world instead of in command of your world. Even your language reveals who's in control. When your words are filled with, "I can't," "I'm just not built for that," or "that's just the way it is," what you're really doing is declaring your submission. Language is the GPS of your soul. It exposes the belief system you're driving with. And if your belief system is broken, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, you'll still end up in the wrong destination. We often wait for life to change before we take control, but the truth is, taking control is what changes life. Control is not about manipulating outcomes. It's about mastering your role in the outcome. It's about recognizing that while you may not control the weather, you absolutely control the sails. And until you adjust them with intention, the winds will carry you to places you were never meant to be. Some people live on autopilot for so long, they start believing it's freedom. But there is no freedom in drifting. There is no freedom in delay. There is no freedom in indecision. Those are just illusions dressed up as rest. Real rest comes from alignment. Real peace comes from ownership. But you cannot own your life until you reclaim the wheel from everything you've silently given power to. Fear doesn't have to stop you. It just has to convince you to stay still. That's its strategy. It doesn't show up in your life kicking down doors or shouting in your face. It whispers. It disguises itself as logic, as caution, as responsibility. It wears the mask of being realistic. And if you're not careful, you'll think you're being wise when really you're being ruled. Fear doesn't need chains to bind you. It only needs your agreement. If it can get you to pause, hesitate, overthink, it wins. Fear rarely says, don't move. Instead, it says, wait a little longer. Think it through again. Make sure everything is perfect first. It doesn't want to paralyze you physically. It wants to freeze you mentally. Because the battlefield is not your environment, it's your mind. That's where the war is won or lost. And every time you say, I'll do it tomorrow, fear applauds quietly, not because it stopped you with force, but because it stopped you with a suggestion you believed. What most people don't understand is that fear is a master of timing. It knows exactly when to show up, right when you're about to make the leap. It waits until you're close to the edge of breakthrough, right when the opportunity is within reach. That's when it speaks the loudest, not to push you back, but just to keep you where you are. And because you've been conditioned to believe that discomfort equals danger, you back off. Not because the thing ahead is impossible, but because the voice behind you is familiar. Staying still is safer than moving forward, at least. That's what fear wants you to think. But the real danger isn't in going too fast. It's in standing still for too long. Stagnation is the silent killer of dreams. You get so used to staying in place that movement feels wrong. Growth starts to feel like risk. Change feels like chaos. And before you know it, you're defending your comfort zone like it's sacred ground, when really it's a cage you built with your own hesitation. Every destiny-driven opportunity you're praying for is already out there. But fear will make you miss appointments that were divinely scheduled. It doesn't cancel the calling. It just distracts you from answering. You don't need fear to knock you down. You just need enough fear to make you doubt. That's all it takes. Doubt becomes delay. Delay becomes a pattern. And eventually that pattern becomes your personality. You start saying, I'm just not a bold person, or that's not me. When the truth is, fear trains you to believe that. Fear works best in silence. It wants you isolated in your mind, rehearsing scenarios that haven't even happened yet. It wants you picturing rejection, failure, embarrassment, and it wants you so consumed by those images that you never even take the shot. What's wild is that fear will have you mourning outcomes that never existed, grieving losses that never occurred, and retreating from enemies that were never real. It doesn't need evidence. It just needs imagination. It thrives in your internal dialogue. Every time you say, what if I fail? Fear sharpens its claws, but it never encourages you to ask, what if I win? It never tells you, what if this changes everything? Fear is a one-sided storyteller. It highlights only the pain, never the possibility. It's biased against your breakthrough, and if you let it narrate your life, the ending will always look like regret. One of fear's favorite tactics is false urgency. It tells you to hurry up and worry. It creates pressure where there is none. You start to feel like if you don't figure everything out immediately, disaster is coming. But fear is lying. There is no monster under the bed, but it will make you check every night anyway, because the goal isn't to prove anything. The goal is just to keep you from sleeping peacefully, from creating boldly, from living fully. Even when you do take action, fear will try to negotiate your effort. It'll say, do just enough to look busy, but not enough to risk failure. It'll have you playing small in the name of strategy. It'll make you overplan, overthink, overanalyze, but never execute. It loves when you read the books, take the courses, watch the videos, as long as you never apply what you learn. That way you feel like you're making progress without ever facing the discomfort of actual growth. And that's what makes fear so effective. It doesn't stop your life, it just slows your spirit. It makes you doubt your readiness, second guess your steps, and postpone your power. You don't even realize it's fear anymore. You start calling it being careful or waiting for the right time, but inside you know the truth. Something is keeping you still, and the longer you let it speak, the more convincing it becomes. Your calling is a vehicle, but it won't move if you stay parked. That means you can be fully equipped, fully anointed, fully gifted, and still go nowhere if you refuse to move. The value of a vehicle isn't in its shine, its horsepower, or its luxury. It's in its movement. It's not enough to just possess potential. Potential that isn't activated becomes wasted weight. And far too many people are sitting inside the calling God gave them with the keys in their hand, the engine running, and yet they remain idle, waiting on a sign, waiting on a push, waiting on a level of certainty that doesn't exist. You don't need more confirmation, you need more courage. Sitting still doesn't bring clarity, it brings confusion. Clarity comes through motion. Understanding comes through obedience. But when you park in fear, you start calling your parking space a destination. You convince yourself you've arrived because you've dressed the part, memorized the lingo, maybe even started the engine. But you're still in the driveway of destiny, never making it to the roads where transformation happens. A parked calling looks impressive but produces nothing. Sometimes we treat our calling like it's a trophy instead of transportation. We frame it on the wall, we talk about it, we post about it, we speak of it in theory and passion, but we never take the steps to make it real. Because real movement demands real decisions, and real decisions demand real risk. That's where most people flinch. That's where the parking brake gets pulled. It's easier to talk about where we could go than it is to get behind the wheel and drive into the unknown. The truth is, the unknown is the only way forward. You can't control the entire road, but you can control whether or not you move, and movement is what unlocks miracles. The doors you're praying for don't open in park. They open when you pull up. Some of the blessings you're waiting on have been waiting on you, but because you haven't shifted out of neutral, you keep missing divine appointments disguised as uncomfortable roads. The blessing is ahead, but the decision is now. Comfort is one of the greatest enemies of calling, because comfort says, you're fine here. It tells you there's no need to stretch, to reach, to press forward. But your calling was never designed to fit inside your comfort zone. It's too big. It demands more space, more capacity, more trust. And the only way to grow into it is to start moving toward it. Staying parked might feel safe, but safety is not the goal. Purpose is. And sometimes purpose looks like driving through storms to get to sunlight. People think they're waiting on God, but sometimes God is waiting on them. The assignment has already been given. The route has already been mapped. The vehicle has already been provided. The only thing left to do is drive. But that first move is always the hardest, because the moment you shift into gear, the moment you start moving, resistance will show up. Doubt will rise. Old voices will scream. But that's not a sign to stop. That's a sign you're finally going somewhere worth reaching. You can't prepare forever. Preparation has a purpose, but it's not the destination. At some point, preparation turns into procrastination, and procrastination is just permission for fear to keep you still. You read, you plan, you strategize, and all of that matters, but none of it replaces action. Action is the only language that momentum responds to. You cannot steer a parked car. God cannot guide what you refuse to move. Think about all the dreams sitting in spiritual garages, covered up, collecting dust. Not because they aren't powerful, but because the person holding the key refused to start. You can attend every seminar, take every course, listen to every podcast, but if you never step into traffic, if you never take the risk of acceleration, your calling will remain a conversation. Power doesn't show up in your potential, it shows up in your motion. And here's the part no one wants to admit. At some point, not moving becomes disobedience. When you've been called to build, to lead, to serve, to speak, to create, but you choose comfort instead, you're not just delaying purpose, you're denying it. You can't keep asking God to bless steps you're not willing to take. Faith was never about knowing the whole route. Faith is about trusting enough to go anyway. It's about saying yes before the road looks clear, because the call itself is your permission to move. The longer you stay parked, the heavier the vehicle begins to feel. You'll start thinking the car doesn't work. You'll start questioning if you were ever called. But the vehicle didn't break, you just haven't driven it. And until you start moving, you'll never know how far it was built to go. You were never meant to just carry your calling. You were meant to move with it, to trust the one who gave it to you enough to take the first turn, press the gas, and head toward the territory he's already prepared. Your past is a reference point, not a steering wheel. It's something to look back at for understanding, not something to use for direction. But too many people are living life in reverse. They're trying to drive forward while constantly staring in the rearview mirror, wondering why they keep crashing. The past was never meant to be the guide for your next steps. It was meant to be a teacher, not a dictator. When you let what happened to you start directing your choices, your mindset, and your future, you've surrendered control of your destiny to a season that's already over. We all have a past, but the power of your past is not in what happened, it's in how you interpret it. Two people can go through the same kind of storm and come out with two completely different outcomes. The difference isn't the pain, it's the perspective. Pain becomes purpose only when it's processed correctly. If you use the past as a reminder of what you survived, it fuels you. But if you use it as evidence of why you can't move forward, it paralyzes you. That's the difference between reference and steering. One informs, the other controls. Some people have allowed past mistakes to become a full-time identity. One wrong decision, one failed relationship, one missed opportunity, and suddenly that becomes the lens through which they see everything. So now they don't apply, don't try, don't dream, don't build, all because they've let a temporary failure take permanent residence in their thinking. The past is supposed to be a place of review, not residence. You visit it to learn, but you don't live there. When your steering wheel is gripped by what hurt you, your route becomes driven by fear. You avoid certain paths not because they're wrong, but because they remind you of pain. You say no to opportunities that look like where you failed, even if they're the key to where you're supposed to be. That's not discernment. That's trauma steering your choices. And until you deal with it, you'll confuse protection with limitation. Just because it looks familiar doesn't mean it's a repeat. Growth demands that you take the wheel back. And taking the wheel doesn't mean denying what happened. It means acknowledging it without allowing it to make your decisions for you. It means refusing to let guilt be your GPS. It means forgiving yourself for who you were when you didn't know better. Because every version of you, even the broken, lost, confused one, was doing the best it could with what it had. But that version doesn't need to be in charge of where you're going. Your calling isn't intimidated by your history. In fact, sometimes it was shaped by it. The problem is people spend more time regretting the past than mining it for wisdom. Every misstep carries instruction. Every detour carries revelation. But you can't access that if you're stuck reliving instead of relearning. The lesson isn't in the event, it's in the reflection. And when you reflect with intention, your past becomes a compass that points to power, not a chain that keeps you bound. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come from the very things you thought disqualified you: the addiction, the bankruptcy, the divorce, the loss. These things may have marked a moment, but they don't define your mission. What happened to you? Is it who you are? And if you don't separate the event from your identity, you'll build an entire life avoiding your own purpose because it reminds you of pain. But freedom starts when you stop letting the past speak louder than your future. It's time to stop rehearsing your history like it's a prophecy. Just because something happened doesn't mean it has to happen again. The enemy wants you so focused on the rear view that you miss the road right in front of you. But the road ahead is wide open. And everything you thought disqualified you is actually the evidence that you're called. The fact that you made it through what should have taken you out is proof that there's more ahead than behind. Your story has power, but only if you let it evolve. If you keep replaying the same chapters, you'll never get to the part where everything shifts. Healing doesn't mean erasing your past. It means learning how to carry it without letting it lead. It means using it to help others without letting it haunt you. It means being honest about it without being held hostage by it. The version of you that was hurt doesn't have to be the version that arrives at destiny. Your past will always have a place in your journey, but it doesn't belong in the driver's seat. It belongs in the glove compartment. There, if you need to look back for a lesson, but never in control of the direction. Because what's ahead of you is greater, wider, deeper, and more powerful than anything behind you. But you'll never see it if you keep driving in circles around yesterday when the road to your next level is calling you forward. Purpose belongs in the driver's seat, not pain, not procrastination. And yet so many lives are being steered by the very things that were meant to be overcome, not obeyed. Pain tries to take the wheel by reminding you of everything that went wrong. Procrastination grabs the wheel by convincing you that later is safer than now, but neither of those drivers are qualified to take you where you're called to go. They don't have a vision for your future. They only have a grip on your delay. Purpose, on the other hand, sees beyond the moment. It doesn't just respond to pressure, it leads through it. When pain is in the driver's seat, every decision is made through the lens of protection, not progression. You start making choices, not based on what could go right, but on what went wrong last time. You shrink opportunities down to your level of past disappointment. You say no to things that were meant to elevate you because you're still carrying the echoes of being let down. Pain doesn't care about your future. It only knows how to protect your wounds. And when it drives, it doesn't take you forward. It drives you in circles. Then there's procrastination. The smooth talker in the passenger seat, always whispering, "You've got time." It never argues with your dreams. It just delays them. It says, "Just one more day. You're not ready yet. Start after you feel more confident." But that day never comes. And while it seems like a small compromise, it robs you of momentum. Procrastination doesn't just waste time, it drains belief. Every delay is a subtle message to your soul that your dream doesn't matter enough to act on now. Purpose isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It waits to be chosen. But when you put it in the driver's seat, everything shifts. Decisions become aligned with destiny, not just comfort. You start thinking long-term instead of short-term. You become less reactive and more intentional. The road may still be filled with obstacles, but you're no longer swerving out of fear. You're driving with clarity. You're leading with conviction. You're no longer asking for permission from your past. You're answering to your future. There's a cost to putting the wrong things in control. Some people haven't just delayed their purpose. They've designed a lifestyle around the delay. They've built routines, relationships, even careers around staying comfortable. And they call it stability. But true stability doesn't come from avoiding risk. It comes from alignment. When purpose drives, peace follows. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is pointed in the right direction. Pain will always have a voice. So will fear. So will doubt. But just because those voices are present doesn't mean they deserve to drive. You can acknowledge them without obeying them. Maturity is learning how to hear fear without halting, how to feel pain without folding, how to notice procrastination without nodding in agreement. And purpose gives you a filter. It tells you what matters and what doesn't. It helps you say no to good things so you can say yes to the right things. Living on purpose requires discipline. It means doing what you said you would do long after the mood you set it in has passed. It means choosing vision over emotion. It means showing up even when no one is clapping yet, because you're not driven by applause. You're driven by assignment. When purpose leads, you don't just work, you build. You don't just survive, you stretch. You don't just plan, you execute. But purpose can't drive if you don't trust it. And trust is built through action. The more you move in purpose, the louder it becomes. You stop second guessing, you stop comparing, you stop explaining yourself to people who weren't assigned to your lane. Because when purpose is in control, validation becomes optional. You're not looking for everyone to agree. You're looking to fulfill what was written. This is why procrastination is so dangerous, not just because it delays success, but because it delays clarity. You can't get clear about your assignment while sitting still. You have to move. Action reveals alignment. Purpose unfolds as you walk in it. But when you keep letting procrastination drive, you miss divine appointments. You forfeit momentum. You numb your own passion by overthinking your next step instead of taking it. And all the while, purpose waits. It doesn't leave. It doesn't expire. But it will sit in the passenger seat until you decide that obedience matters more than feelings, that calling matters more than comfort, that forward matters more than familiar. The moment you make that shift, the moment you grab the wheel and put purpose where it belongs, everything begins to align. Not because it suddenly got easier, but because you finally decided who's really in control. Start the engine. Take the wheel. Drive like you were born to dominate. Every day is a new opportunity to make the decision to shift from waiting to doing, from wishing to working. The engine is already running. The potential is already there. The power is within you. The only question is, will you take the wheel and move, or will you let life pass you by as a spectator, never realizing you were meant to be in the driver's seat? The road ahead is open, but the journey begins with one choice: to start moving, to start taking action, and to start dominating the terrain you've been given. So many people are waiting for the perfect moments, the perfect circumstances, the perfect alignment of events. But here's the truth. There is no such thing as the perfect moment. The perfect moment is the one you create when you decide to move. You may not have all the answers. You may not know exactly where the road leads. But that's the beauty of it. You weren't meant to have everything figured out before you start. You were meant to trust that the engine will run as long as you keep pressing the gas. The moment you decide to go, momentum begins to work on your behalf. Taking the wheel is a declaration of ownership. It says, I'm in control now. No longer will you allow fear, doubt, or insecurity to determine your direction. You are the driver of your destiny. You can no longer sit in the backseat, letting the opinions and expectations of others chart your course. It's time to take full responsibility for your journey, for your dreams, and for your decisions. The road ahead is yours, but you must be the one to drive it. You have everything you need: the engine, the vehicle, and the power. Now it's up to you to take the wheel. Driving like you were born to dominate isn't about waiting for permission. It's about owning every inch of the road, every turn, every curve. Dominating isn't about overpowering others. It's about mastering your own path. It's about creating an environment where you thrive, where you're unapologetically in your element, and where every step you take is aligned with your purpose. This isn't about comparison. It's about confidence. You were made for greatness, but greatness doesn't show up without a drive. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you choose to dominate your life, your choices, your future. The world is full of passengers, people who wait for someone else to lead them, someone else to take charge, someone else to show them the way. But that's not you. You are a leader in your own life. It's time to stop being the passenger and start being the driver. There is a greatness in you that can only be unlocked when you take responsibility for where you're going and how you get there. Every decision you make can either move you closer to or further from your purpose. So why would you let anyone else take control of your direction? When you start the engine, you activate your potential. You activate the strength, the skill, the drive that has been waiting for you to realize it's there. You don't have to know everything before you go. You just need to know that you are equipped with what you need to move forward. And when you start moving, that's when things begin to align. The road ahead might be unknown, but it's also full of possibilities. The more you drive, the more you'll see. The more you move, the more you'll learn. The more you act, the more you'll achieve. But here's the key. The longer you sit still, the more you miss out on. The engine can be running, but if you're not willing to take the wheel, nothing happens. Don't wait for someone to push you forward. Don't wait for the perfect sign. Don't wait for everything to line up perfectly, because that will never happen. The key to domination is not in waiting for the perfect moment. It's in making the moment perfect by stepping up and driving. The moment you start moving, everything shifts. The more you drive, the more you shape your destiny. Driving like you were born to dominate means you stop being afraid of the bumps in the road, the setbacks, or the obstacles. It means you realize that every detour, every challenge is part of the ride. Dominance isn't about avoiding the difficulties. It's about handling them with confidence. It's about knowing that every obstacle is just another opportunity to show the world what you're made of. You are built for this journey. The challenges are just proof that you are moving in the right direction. Keep your foot on the gas and trust that every bump is pushing you closer to where you need to be. You'll have moments when doubt creeps in, when fear tries to convince you to pull over and stop. But that's the moment when you need to press the pedal even harder. The only way to break through fear is to drive straight through it. The more you lean into the discomfort, the stronger your resolve becomes. When you dominate the road, you don't let fear decide when you stop or go. You decide. Your past does not have the power to slow you down. Your fears do not have the authority to turn you around. You are the driver, and the only direction is forward. To drive like you were born to dominate is to understand that the journey isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about who you become along the way. It's about the courage you develop, the discipline you build, the confidence you forge. Every mile you drive adds to your growth, adds to your character, and adds to the legacy you'll leave behind. You were born to dominate this road. You were born to handle the turns, the straightaways, the traffic, and the challenges. The engine is running. Now it's time to take the wheel and drive like you were born to dominate.